we're thrilled that our buddy Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee is here. Sacramento Bee is doing a great job of covering the Kings playoff run here, which, Chris, it feels like this thing might keep going. They're up 2-0 on the Golden State Warriors, and I know we've got to talk about the incident with Draymond Green and Domantas Sabonis, but I'd like to start with the game. Mm-hmm. What were your takeaways outside of that ridiculous WWE moment? What was your takeaways from the game and why the Kings are able to be up 2-0 in this series?
I think the first two games both fall in under the same category for me. Like I think the Kings' physicality is really what's standing out, right? They're being the aggressors. They're being more physical. They're playing better defense than at any point in the regular season. And those were really the big questions coming into the series, right? Because Mike Brown, you look at, the games against the Celtics and the Bucks and, the 76ers. And there were a handful of games that the Kings lost this year. And the first thing Mike Brown said in his post-game press conferences was, we got to play with more physicality and play better defense. And they've been the more physical team than the seasoned, experienced Golden State Warriors, which I think is ultimately the biggest reason why they're up 2-0 so far. And so that physicality is allowing them to be the better rebounding team. They're turning the ball over less, and they're benefiting off the Warriors turnovers and beating them in points off turnovers, right? So they're just out. They're bringing the fight to the Warriors, and I think it's a little unique too because, and this was brought up I think by Kendra Andrews post game last night, that the Warriors typically in a series get an advantage when they speed up against their opponents. When they go small, you remember 2015, right? Draymond Green gets inserted in the starting lineup. They play faster. They run a lot of teams with big centers off the floor. They can't really do that against the Kings. And I think this is kind of the first time they've met a team in the postseason that likes to play as fast, if not faster, than they do. So you pair that physicality with the fact that the Warriors can't reach that extra gear by playing faster than their opponent. I think those are the reasons that the Kings are ultimately up. And then you're getting, De'Aaron Fox doing his thing in the fourth quarter. And the Kings just out executing the Warriors down the stretch, making fewer mistakes, and just being the better team through two games. And so now the series switches and going to San Francisco for games 3 and 4 will be an entirely new test. But I mean, given the questions we had about the Kings, or I had about the Kings coming into this series, I think the first two games couldn't have gone much better.
Chris, are the Sacramento Kings, and let's preface it because people seem to get, things mangled up and confused.
Are you talking on Twitter? Are people talking about the series on Twitter?
A little bit. Are the 2022-2023 Sacramento Kings just better than the 2022-2023 Golden State Warriors?
They have been. I mean, they have been, right? They were pretty much all season. They were in the first two games of this series. So there isn't really any evidence to say in this moment, as we speak right now, that the Warriors are better than the Kings, because, everything that we know about the Warriors has a lot more to do with their history and their championship pedigree than, the evidence we've seen this year. Like, the Kings have not dealt with injuries throughout the season that the Warriors have. The Kings bench has been far more stable, and there haven't been moving pieces and rotation changes and, Gary Payton coming in via trade. Like, the Kings have had stability beyond their starting lineup has been super stable and their bench has been super stable. And they haven't had a roller coaster season the way the Warriors have. So I think if right now in this moment, based on the fact that, the Kings were the higher seed, the Kings had far more stability during the regular season, more consistency during the regular season, the fact that the Kings had the best record in the Western Conference on the road while the Warriors were one of the worst teams in the NBA on the road. Yeah, I think right now all the evidence suggests that the Kings are the better team right now, but they play a 7-game series for a reason. And it's not over after 2 games. And I think the Warriors, correctly pointed out, Steph Curry pointed out after the game, and I believe this to a certain extent, but the old adage, it might be cliche, is the series doesn't start until a road team wins a game, right? So if the Kings go into Chase and split one of two or win both those games, obviously the series will be over in a sweep in that sense. But I just think, and I agree with Mike Brown, who said this, repeatedly, as the series goes on, it's going to get more difficult and more difficult. And going to Chase, where the Warriors have been one of the best home teams in the NBA, is going to be a drastically different type of test than playing in Golden One, where, you know, the entire city has the Kings back, and there are like no Warriors fans in the building, which was somewhat of a surprise too.
How much credit, Chris, does Sacramento deserve for kind of the turnovers that Golden State has been committing? And, you know, and I'm not trying to lead your answer here by saying the off night that some of their guys had, particularly in the fourth quarter and in the most clutch moments. It felt like the Kings defense got a bit stingier.
Yeah, and this is why, you know, Mike Brown is probably the perfect coach for the Kings to have in this series, because he knows exactly what the Warriors' issues are, and their issues are being loose with the ball and kind of throwing, you know, lazy passes and like easily interceptable or deflectable passes. And the Kings are in tune with that. They understand that there are going to be opportunities to turn the ball over, and there are going to be opportunities to pressure the Warriors on the perimeter in ways that they typically aren't. And so I think De'Aaron Fox deserves a lot of credit for his on-ball defense. Davion Mitchell has obviously been really good with his on-ball defense. I think there are times when Domantas Sabonis and double teams and switches is handling himself better than I really anticipated, but there are also times where it looks like a layup line for certain stretches. But no, I think the Kings and Mike Brown in particular deserve a lot of credit, because Mike Brown knows all their actions, right? He knows what their weaknesses are. He knows they can be loose with the ball. And with the Kings being so attentive to having their hands up and anticipating some of these passes and always trying to be in passing lanes and not overplaying one side and allowing backdoor cuts or allowing guys to get open on the perimeter, has just really gummed things up for the Warriors so far. And that's really been one of the stories of the series. They're being physical, and Mike Brown has given them a ton of really helpful information, it would seem, based on how they're playing defense. And that's, you know, that to me is a huge factor in why the Kings are where they are right now, is because I don't know if there's another coach in the league who would have the Kings playing this type of defense against that team in particular, given that Mike Brown was on the Warriors staff for 6 seasons before this one.
I want to go to the Warriors side here, and you know, I know we're in Sacramento, but I want to figure this out for the Warriors. If you're Steve Kerr, what are you doing right now? What are you saying to try and turn this series around? Like, what's the strategy for the Warriors right now after these first 2 games?
Yeah, he talked about it post game last night. Like they're perpetually in that mode where they're trying to find the balance of playing with fluidity, playing with motion, and not turning the ball over, right? Like their game is predicated on player movement and making smart passes and all of that, but they tend to get loose with it, and they tend to try to, you know, Mike Brown talked about it in the beginning of the season, right? Like, no, we don't need to hit a home run with every pass. We just need to keep hitting singles. And I think Steve Kerr is very much in that mode where he's trying to find the balance of, okay, we need to make good passes and we need to set ourselves up to create better shots, but we also can't be turning the ball over, and we have to be smarter with those passes. So, you know, the Warriors really, that like, they didn't appear all that worried. Like they are still, the way they're talking, like Draymond Green mentioned it. He was like, yeah, we've never been down 0-2, but we've conquered every other challenge in front of us before. So this one's going to be fun, right? Like that was more or less his quote. And I guess when you win 4 championships and you never lost a Western Conference playoff series, you can have that confidence. But you know, this is a different Warriors team, right? Like that the old Warriors teams had a peak version of Andre Iguodala, who was, you know, an elite defensive player who could guard 1 through 4, and was also a really smart offensive player who wouldn't turn the ball over, who was a really good passer, and who could finish on fast breaks and all those things. Like they're really missing that type of player because Jordan Poole isn't it in the series. Dante DiVincenzo, you know, cannot guard De'Aaron Fox, or at least he didn't in the first 2 games. So in terms of the Warriors, like they're sort of falling back on their history and the confidence that gives them. But they've only been down by 2 games in a series once, and that was the Western Conference Finals in 2016 when they came back from a 3-1 deficit to beat Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. That was a long time ago, obviously. So we'll see if the Warriors, you know, if that line of thinking is effective enough. But they just have to play a lot better. They have to bring the fight to the Kings, and the Kings have clearly brought the fight to them. And I think it's had the Warriors on their heels in the first 2 games so far.
Chris, you're around this team a lot at practices, shoot arounds, all these media scrums, and so on. One thing that's really stood out to me is it feels like, at least on the surface, that this team is laser focused. There's been a lot of talk of experience and emotion and overwhelming moments. We were all at the Golden One Center on Saturday, and we recognized what a moment that was. I think even De'Aaron acknowledged it. Harrison Barnes acknowledged it, but they were able to get over that really quickly, and it feels like they've really zeroed in on the task. Mike has been adamant from jump. This isn't just about reaching the playoffs. We've got the same goals that everybody else has. Have you picked up on that? Like, is their focus, are they as locked in as they appear on the outside?
Yeah, you could go back to January and February when it was like very apparent that this team was real and had a chance to surpass the expectation coming into the season that they were, a play-in team or trying to get at least into the play-in, right? They were like, "No, we're better than that." And they, you can go back and when they won their 41st game and everyone, they're getting questions about, "Oh, it's the first time you guys have been over 500 in forever." They're like, "Yeah, we kind of expected this. Like, we never really cared about being better than 500." And I think the same could be said for the playoff stuff, at least leading into it. Like when they clinched the playoff berth, they obviously talked about how good it was for the city of Sacramento and the fans and all of that. But they would always mention, like, we have far bigger goals than just reaching the playoffs. They want to be a team that gets to the playoffs every year, and they want to be a team that can win multiple playoff series every year and potentially get to the level where they think they can contend for championships. Like, that is ultimately their goal. So they've been locked in on that, with that mindset all season, despite the outside chatter about, "Wow, it's so cool that this team's over 500 for the first time in 16 years," or, "Oh, wow, it's so cool this team's clinched the playoffs for the first time since 2006." They've been like, "Yeah, that's great, but like, we knew in training camp, once we saw what this roster was capable of, and once we, learned about Mike Brown and what his messaging is and how he's coaching us, that we're a far better team than somebody who could just snap this 500 streak or snap this playoff streak." So I think this is kind of a culmination of that, right? Like, they've had this mindset that they're far better than a team that can just reach the playoffs. They think they can win playoff series, and so far through 2 games in round one, that's what it's looking like.
Yeah.
Casey, I'm sorry.
No.
I have our segue here, unfortunately.
Oh.
From Shams Charania, it's looking unlikely Warriors forward Draymond Green will be suspended for Game 3 versus the Kings after stepping on Domantas Sabonis when Sabonis grabbed his leg on Monday night. Again, I repeat, from Sean Charania, it is looking unlikely Warriors forward Draymond Green will be suspended for Game 3. Shams followed up with, "Those around the situation expect a fine for Green, but that he will be available for Game 3 given the ejection flagrant 2 and circumstances around the incident with Sabonis."
It's fine with me. I want the Kings to beat their ass with him out there.
I
Chris.
think that's the
Already.
best approach to have, Kenny. Like, you don't want to win a series with a guy suspended. I mean, you want to win the series ultimately, but like, you want to be the team at its best,
It
right?
doesn't matter if
Yeah.
Draymond plays or he doesn't. Like,
Not
I mean,
good
his
enough.
defense matters, but he's not. So we'll use that, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to talk about Davion and De'Aaron and the 3 hours away from being named Clutch Player of the Year. How do you feel about what we saw last night with Draymond, Domas, in the moments following with Adam Silver in attendance?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was two people who did, like, I think there were two bad acts. I think, Draymond's was probably substantially worse and obviously a lot more demonstrative. But Sabonis didn't deny the fact that he grabbed onto Draymond's ankle even after the game. When he was asked about it, he just said, "It's the playoffs and things happen." And so, look, this is just me completely speculating. I haven't heard this, but like, given Mike Brown's familiarity with Draymond Green, it wouldn't surprise me if, there was a little bit of like gamesmanship, Mike Brown talking to his team like, "Hey, if you guys can like grab onto Draymond or irritate him a little bit, like, he's got a short fuse, particularly on the road. Like, maybe we can, get something like this out of him, get him ejected or get him suspended in a game." So that again, and that's just me speculating. So I don't know. I think Sabonis not denying the fact that he grabbed on to Draymond's ankle says a lot, in my opinion. And I think Draymond is pretty unapologetic about it. Like, I think he's the type of guy to where if you're playing hoops and you grab onto his ankle, he's going to make you pay for it. And I think that's ultimately what happened. And I think, I think the Mark Spears report that Draymond Green asked for an X-ray in light. I don't know if you guys have talked about that. I do have a
No, because I don't think he's serious.
Right. I think my
he's
sneaking suspicion is that's kind of a troll job from Draymond against Sabonis. And so, I think it's part of I don't think either team thinks highly of the other individual in this circumstance. I don't think the Warriors have a super high opinion of the way Domantas Sabonis handled the situation, and obviously the Kings don't have a high opinion of the way Draymond handled the situation. I think if the NBA, like, Domantas received a technical, so that was kind of my thought. Like, if they're going to suspend Draymond and give, I don't know that it made a whole lot of sense to suspend Draymond after giving Domantas Sabonis a technical. Like, obviously it was a bad act, but it was premeditated by something that was called a technical after review. So I think it would have been a little bit difficult to justify a suspension there. But again, like, I'm of the opinion, like, you just want all the best players in the series. Like, that's from an onlooker standpoint, you want all the best players in the series. If you're the Kings, you want to beat the team at full strength. If you're the Warriors, you want to beat the Kings at full strength. So, like, I think it's one of those controversial things that happen in the playoffs. And I'm sure that if anything else were to happen to Draymond, there would be a suspension because he's going to have a strike against him after what happened in Game 2. So it's not entirely surprising to me that he's not suspended. But, I think it's just one of those things. This is what happens with Draymond Green. And it's the Warriors. The Warriors have put up with a lot. And I'm curious if after the season they're going to continue to put up with it, given his contract status and all of that.
Well, Draymond can clearly get suckered into things. He's an unhinged individual.
He is.
And
Yeah.
I like I said, I'm not even joking. If the opportunity presented itself, I would absolutely pull a Phil Jackson and JoJo English. I don't know who that is, Kessler Edwards or somebody like that. Just go mess with him. Just go mess with him. Go push. He'll respond. He gets suckered into things all the time. Suckers get suckered into bad behavior, and that's what would happen with him. I do it. I know Mark when I see one.
How do you really feel about Draymond? Curious.
He throws it.
If Brian Windhurst were here, he'd be like, "That's the mark, Draymond Green. That's the mark right there. The Kings are going to try to get to Draymond Green. That's the mark. That's the sweet spot for the Sacramento Kings."
It's hard to argue against that based on how last night went.
It's silly, man. I honestly thought I view the Domas stuff. I actually, and I don't want to talk out of pocket because I listened to it once. We can run it back here. I actually took a slightly different interpretation of what Domas said.
Mm-hmm.
You know how better than we do how Domas is in those press conferences, those media scrums. He's talking pretty, and it wasn't even a press conference. He wasn't at the table. He was at his locker. Right. He talks pretty quickly. He just tries to get through things. When he made the remark, and again, maybe I'm naive, when he made the remark about it's basketball, things happen, I kind of thought he was talking about the entire situation. I didn't think he was necessarily talking about the moment of, where he allegedly grabbed his foot. I thought he was more saying, hey, stuff happens in basketball games. You collide, you hit each other. He knows that better than anyone. He gets his ass kicked every single game.
Yeah.
I think he's talking about my first thought was he was talking about situations on the floor, not specifically like almost saying, hey, look, I understand we get kicked, we get hit, we get elbowed, but the stomp was out of line. That's how I took it. And again, I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, and he tends to be very diplomatic in just about everything, and he even said it, like, I don't love talking to the media. Like, that's not his favorite thing. He's pretty good at it, but he's not a guy who's like jumping in front of microphones at any chance he gets. So obviously, they're again, the only point I would make is that the question was, Draymond said you pulled on his ankle. Did that happen?
Yeah.
And then he said, things happen in basketball games. So he had the opportunity to say, no, it didn't. But again, like, we're kind of doing, I don't know how helpful it is to relitigate all of this stuff. Just based on, that it's heat of the moment stuff, and these media scrums are super awkward. I'm curious if, like, in a one-on-one scenario, or what Domas would be saying to his teammates about all of that stuff. That's that I have no idea. I'd just be guessing at that point. But I did think he had an opportunity to say, no, I didn't yank on his ankle intentionally, but he didn't. He just said things happen. So
yeah, it's fair.
The other thing about all this is none of it works with the Kings. This particular Kings team, none of the antics, none of the. I mean, Draymond tried to bait Malik Monk into something in like the third quarter or second quarter. I mean, he was trying it all night. None of it works. Kings just go out there and they say, hey, you can do all that. All the talk that was going on before. We got business to handle, and we're here to handle it and do it the best that we can.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting, though, because, based on Twitter, and again, I don't want to base everything off Twitter, but I think Warriors fans have now identified Domas as the villain, and what's that going to look like in San Francisco? And how's Domas going to respond to that?
I've identified Warriors fans as people who don't know what the hell they're talking about.
I'm just saying, he's going to get booed. He's going to get, he's going to be the guy that, that happens. That happens in every series. Every series, every playoff series, there's somebody from the other team that the opposing team identifies for whatever reason, and it's up to that player to respond when they have to go into that hostile environment.
And that's fine. Like, I truthfully don't think Domas cares.
He don't care.
He does not care.
You don't go to work on him like you did last time.
And the other thing that, maybe you got a better pulse on this than I do, but everyone was really quick to talk about a Warriors takeover at the Golden One Center, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about what Chase Center might look like on Thursday night.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I would imagine the Kings being up 2-0 would lend to more Kings fans making the trip. That's certainly going to be a storyline. I know there are going to be news crews from Sacramento looking out for that storyline outside the arena leading into it.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. And I am curious, like, there have been so many playoff games that Warriors fans have had the opportunity to go to, that, like, is there some level of lethargy or apathy when it comes to, like, man, are we really going to shell out thousands of dollars again? After, because it's not like those Kings. Yeah, right. And so, but Kings fans are going to be the ones, like, man, we've never been in this spot. It's been almost 2 decades since we've had an opportunity to go to a road game, and particularly one so close like that. That's never happened. So, I think there's a legitimate chance. There's a good contingent of Kings fans inside Chase Center, but Warriors fans are allowed to. I think it's probably not the level of Oracle. I would equate, I was in the building for the We Believe Warriors run in 2007, and I thought it was damn near the same as what we've experienced at Golden One the last 2 nights. So I think Warriors fans are known for being loud too, and I think playoff atmospheres just in general, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference in terms of, like, the noise factor when you go arena to arena. I think everybody's more into it, maybe with the exception of, like, Miami or something. Like, I think you're going to find loud arenas everywhere in the playoffs. So I don't know, like, Steve Kerr mentioned it, like, yeah, it's loud and it affects the way we communicate, but the noise hasn't really affected the way anybody's played. I might push back on that because the Warriors seem to be, like, just missing defenders, right? Like, somebody dribbling, or De'Aaron Fox ripping Steph Curry from behind because Curry doesn't hear somebody yelling that Fox is behind him. Maybe that's a factor, but no, I am expecting a good contingent of Kings fans. This is an unprecedented time for them. They have an opportunity to drive a couple hours to go to a road playoff game against the defending champs. Like, what's better than that if you're a fan? So I do think there's a good chance that there's a lot of Kings fans in San Francisco on Thursday and Sunday.
Well, I know you'll be there.
30% Kings fans.
30%?
30% on Thursday and Sunday.
Okay. If it's 3-0, I think 30% on Sunday would
go up.
I think if there's 30% on Friday, I would be pretty surprised. But but if they're up 3-0 on Sunday, I think 30% or more would be feasible.
Well, get there on Thursday because I think that's when the game's in. I don't want you to get there late. So
oh yeah, I'll get there Thursday. I'm leaving Thursday morning. Checking in the hotel.
You go.
Yeah, we'll be good. We'll be all set.
Good stuff, Chris. We appreciate you, man. Thanks
the
as
man,
always
Chris.
for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys. I hope I don't catch any strays on Twitter here. I'll keep them.
No, you're
keep
safe.
them
No,
mentions
no,
in.
you're
All
good.
right.
You there,
You're
bro.
good.
Certified,
Yeah,
bro.
you good. You good. We appreciate you, Chris.
All right. I appreciate you guys for having me. Talk
Yes,
soon.
indeed.